thank you for joining me. You've all had your interviews. Can I start just by maybe 30 seconds each explaining your most important policy, the policy that means the most to you, and why it does? Will?
Oh, my most important policy is definitely my policy regarding YUSU bars and their sachet sauces, which just need to go. Bottled sauces are much better. They're better for the environment, they are cheaper, and they offer a more bespoke experience.
Roberto?
Hi, so I think the university needs to ensure that students aren't spending as much money as they currently are. That means cap accommodation costs, ensure that there's more economy accommodation available, and helping students in departments that pay higher fees to sort of subsidize those costs.
Mine is to sort of implement this digital system of feedback, which sort of addresses the fact that students feel a little bit left out of the loop when it comes to the planning of YUSU and the university, and it sort of gives them a voice in the boardrooms of those places, so they have an influential voice in their plans.
Max?
My most important manifesto point, I'd say, is making sure the university is doing everything it can to support the mental health of students, because it's really not where we'd like it to be. I think it's something that can definitely grow over the next couple of years with news of the £500,000 investment and other measures.
All right, then. Well, a few interesting points there. Let's start with the new colleges, because a few of you mentioned it in your interviews. How many of you made investigations into what the nature of the accommodation that is currently being built in those accommodation blocks? Is that sort of set in stone?
What I've heard so far is I've had quite evasive responses, and when asking if they'd be building economy and standard sort of rooms, I've been told they'll provide a range of accommodation.
Yeah, I think the most concerning thing is the proportion that will be sort of higher tier, higher bracket accommodation, and that's the sort of the worrying part of this.
So I could actually answer this. Basically, the current accommodation plans are based on demand at the moment, which is actually for higher premium accommodation because students apply more for premium. What I've been doing the past 2 terms is collecting data, looking at exactly why that is. The sort of survey went out today, and we can sort of look at what exactly students want and why they're going more for premium accommodation.
Okay, Will, how would you then use your power as UC President to actually lobby the university to reduce that accommodation? Because we saw accommodation, the lowest bracket of accommodation, sneak over the £100 mark this year, £100 per week mark.
Well, I think it's unrealistic to expect all prices to drop, but if there are people looking for premium accommodation and they're building more premium accommodation, you need to increase the spread of prices so make sure if things are getting more expensive, they're also getting cheaper in some areas. I mean, certainly I was going for premium accommodation. I ended up with the more economy accommodation, which I was actually perfectly happy with. Yeah,
I think that actually that's an issue. The reason more of that's being built is because that's what students are demanding when they come in. But what we should realise is that when students are here, they feel like, oh, I'm nervous about uni, I need to have a bathroom, that's how I'll feel safe. But actually once they get to uni, they're not really as bothered about having a bathroom and a huge bed and a TV. That isn't a priority anymore, but the university's building their stuff based on the feedback they're getting pre-uni rather than post.
I think a big part of it as well is that there's only 250 blocks, like in Halifax or something, that are actually the cheapest accommodation available. There's some in Derwent, but they're getting knocked down, so the uni's agreed to sort of replace them in a 1-to-1 ratio. The problem is the second cheapest accommodation available is £750 more expensive, and then the most economy after that is premium, which is actually less than economy catered.
I think the most worrying thing we actually need to look at is that all on-campus accommodation rises above inflation right now, which means the older the accommodation is getting, the more expensive it's actually getting, which makes no sense whatsoever.
So what do you think personally you can do? I mean, what power do you foresee yourself having in changing this? Because the university's a business, it's got to make money.
Well, I think it's looking at private investment, because currently the reason why we have to rise above inflation is because there's certain agreements with the private investors when it comes to building accommodation. So that means when it comes to the new colleges, I think we should definitely push the university more into looking at loans and things like that, rather than looking at private investors.
Yeah, a big thing that this app, this digital feedback system that I spoke about is about creating a mandate. Like, how do you create a mandate? You get students to sign up, you get students to protest, you get them to fill in surveys, but students don't do that. Even if they really care about situations, they still won't bother. And this app sort of aims to generate that fast. And if you say, like, okay, from a load of students here, do you care if accommodation prices go up? And you get 500 students saying, yes, this really matters to me, like that's going to start making the university sort of make decisions based on this.
I think when I pop back onto the app, I'd just like to hear what the other two candidates say about this issue of affordable policy and how far the university can influence the business plan. The student union president can influence the business plans of the university. Roberto.
Okay, so we're at like a really different point in time right now where these 2 new colleges have not been signed for yet. I think considering, as Max said, certain agreements have been signed years back, there's no real way to change those accommodations without like mass protest or something. The way we have to go is sort of pressure the uni to ensure that we get good deals for these 2 new colleges. And part of that is just taking data and being like, look, this is what students actually feel about accommodation. Your data states that students want premium accommodation more, but actually that's because your price brackets are flawed. The way that they're divided, the amount provided is not enough. I think it's just going with data and saying to the uni, listen to your students.
Will, is this something you'd like to hardline the university on?
Personally, no, because it's a long-term issue which as we can be pressuring them over the next few years, but ultimately I feel like in a year I couldn't make that much of a difference on this regard.
Okay, interesting viewpoint. Moving on to the digital systems. Alex, why is your app going to work when we've seen countless technological plans from YUSU candidates, come and go? The YUSU website is famously quite immalleable,
Yeah, I suppose it's simplifying how we generate feedback. Okay, so for example, you post on this app, do you care if, this is an example of generating a mandate for change. So do you care if VAM reporters is moved to the information centre? Obviously something that happened last year, big contentious issue. We then sort of decide the answers possible, and we do that so that we can make it really usable data. So do you care because you care about porters? Is it inconvenient? Does it affect your college identity? Then we use the system of Union Cloud to collate data, so we know their college, we know their year group, we know their course, and suddenly you've got people, it's a simple question that will be relevant, and then they'll answer, and suddenly we've got sort of X number of students, second year VAMBA, that think this directly affects their college identity.
Max, do students get feedback opportunities enough?
I think they do. I don't think it's necessarily the mandate that is the problem. I think the university on most things actually, I think, while they might act like they don't know what students want in certain respects, but I think the real problem is YUSU isn't transparent enough with their dealings with the university and when they lobby them. When it came to, for example, the deposit scheme, Millie got the deposit down from 300 to 120, but that hasn't been said anywhere. No one knows that that's happened. Those sort of things need to be brought to students.
Roberto, the transparency was something you brought up in your interview.
Yeah, so this is something I'm really keen on. I think SABs do actually quite a bit. The problem is that it's not widely advertised. For example, the new Spring Lane building was 5 years of SABs work in the making. It just isn't really explained. Millie sits on like a committee that talks about rent groups. The minutes haven't been updated since Sam Maguire, which is 2014. So right now I'm looking at rents and I'm thinking what's been going on in these meetings, and I have absolutely no idea. I think SABs do a lot for students, but they just don't communicate it enough. I think you need something like a timeline on the YUSU website or something like that, detailing when sort of candidates are going to go to certain meetings, when they plan on achieving manifesto goals, and also what networks are up to.
Will, your view on transparency and SABs getting what they do out there, and do they do the work and we just don't see it?
I think in terms of transparency and in terms of finding out what students think, modern technology is flawed. I personally, and I would say a lot of my friends, we don't, you don't check Twitter, you don't check Facebook as much as we want to. Why would I want to check a third-party app? Why would I want to check my emails to check other stuff? The only way to really communicate with people is the old-fashioned way. Get out there and talk to them.
Alex, a fair point?
I think an important incentive that I didn't mention is gamifying this system and I'm thinking about using Yo-Yo Wallet to sort of, if you manage to give sort of points for a certain number of surveys, which is a possibility, you suddenly got a real incentive to be like, okay, I'm going to answer this number of questions and do this for this incentive.
Do we fail to see SABs out and about enough? Max, you spoke about post-campaign, you're still going to be out there, still going to be talking to students.
Yeah, I think it's basically just saying, I'm going to be here between this and this time, come up and speak to me. And not just that, because I think a lot of the time students won't come up and engage. You just have to go out there and talk to people on the street, basically on campus. Whether that means after campaigning, if it comes to a big issue like mental health, something, wearing a billboard, asking students' opinions right on campus. I think that's the way to go, really.
Okay, Roberto, the openness of YUSU, those open hours, is that something you'd also look to implement?
I mean, you're one person representing about 18,000 students. I don't think it makes sense to be able to do that without sitting down and just talking to people. It's why I sort of highlighted that I want to do focus groups and targeted surveys at different groups of students to find out what sort of different things YUSU can provide for them.
Okay, Roberto, thank you. You mentioned there mental health, and it's been an issue. It's been an issue that's talked about quite a lot so far this evening, and I think it is. In loads of manifestos we've seen it already this campaign. Where is the problem located in mental health? I mean, part of me thinks it's beyond a university or school. It's to do with national health trusts and local councils, isn't it?
I think it's everyone's responsibility. If my friends are upset, I want to try and help them by pointing them in the right direction. I think everyone is responsible for their own mental health, for the mental health of the people around them. It's about supporting each other. I think also you need to make sure having places you can go to is not necessarily what people need. Maybe you need someone to come to you, or maybe you just need to have people on the bus who just come up to you, look a bit down. How you doing? I think that would be a great thing to do.
It's fair to say more personal support, less institutionalised support.
Exactly. Yeah.
Anyone else want to chime in on that?
I think when it comes to mental health in York, a lot of the answers that university are getting are long-term things. We need to be doing things in the interim period. I think one of the best ways to do that is through colleges. As a chair, I saw assistant heads, tutors. They are the lifeblood of the university in dealing with these issues. They're the person who's there to talk to. They're the person who's there as an ear to listen to. We should be giving those sort of people a lot more support and be signposting students better to those sort of services.
Roberto, are colleges the answer to this?
I think partially. I think there's some contingencies in the data. For example, last year over 50% of suicides were East Asian students on campus, and last year I had a proportionately higher number of suicides than previous years. I think we definitely need to provide specialized support and look at ways to help these students. I met with Open Door and they said that a lot of these students have trouble integrating in the UK with other students. I think we need to find ways to ensure that they feel welcome, that they're being talked to, that they have places and people they can talk to and be listened to.
Alex, is your mental health camp policy built on sort of expansion of these services existing, or perhaps new focus groups like Roberto's?
Yeah, I think it's similar to what Max said on facilitating conversations with your colleges, but also facilitate when those conversations need to happen, facilitating with the right sort of individuals, the trained individuals, and making sure that the route to those individuals is as easy as it can possibly be, and sort of confidential as well.
Would you like to see an expansion of the current services, so Open Door, Nightline that we have? Is that
definitely? That's something that's already being put forward in the Graham report. Things like that need to happen. Yeah,
generally across the board.
Yeah, that's what that money should go towards.
Yeah, I mean, here you have like £500,000 being put into the uni. 120,000 has been spent this year. I think we definitely need to look at ways to increase services available. This year Open Door hired someone who speaks Mandarin specifically to help East Asian students. I think we need to look at ways to spend that money to help other specialized groups, but also students in general.
I think not all problems necessarily need to be solved with money. I think there are things you can do completely for free, just by increasing the message of peer help.
I disagree with that to an extent when you have the sort of waiting queues you do on Open Door teams. Right now you just can't get an appointment. You literally, it's not even a waiting list anymore because it's fully booked for the term.
But if my housemates, if my course mates, if people closer around me are encouraged to help me, and we're given ways to understand each other on a more peer-to-peer basis, we don't need to be going to these.
I think that's okay for certain cases, but much more extreme cases. Yeah, students aren't trained to be dealing with these sort of cases.
But we might be reducing strain due to less important cases, and so more important cases can actually get to the places.
I think availability to trained professionals does cost money, and if you want to increase that availability, you do need to spend something.
I definitely feel like it's a mix. In the Graham report, actually, it said that 75% of students that went to Open Door also went to other friends first. So I definitely think we need to find ways to, as you said, get the message across, like to the average student. Who can we help?
Thank you. Well? Very quickly, one word, why should people vote for you, Max?
I think you should vote for me because I really care about York and I want to make York students' lives better.
Alex?
I'm passionate about students having a good time at York.
Roberto.
I've been the YUSU international officer the last 2 years, have a lot of experience and care about students.
Will.
Be back Saturday 8:30.
Thank you. Thank you to